This is the story of what may arguably be one of the most impactful foundations in the history of the city of Roanoke. And it is also the most unknown. As a former foundation chair once put it, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. Now is the time to tell their story, and perhaps also give these leaders a little well-deserved credit. This is the Roanoke Foundation for Downtown Incorporated, and this is the story of how RFDI saved 3 of Roanoke's most historic buildings, birthed a center for higher education, and created the catalyst for Roanoke's downtown living boom. All with a few clever maneuvers. This is the story of RFDI and the Norfolk Southern buildings, as told by the leaders who made it happen.
Sometimes history has a way of looking like you were really smart, but all the stars really lined up. The city had already said, well, we don't want them because we're concerned about the asbestos in the buildings. And so Norfolk Southern was strongly considering tearing the buildings down.
It was a really sad time for Roanoke when the biggest buildings on a major portion of downtown went dark. And so the railroad was trying to find a home, a sympathetic home, thankfully, to the city for those properties, and had some difficulties finding a home for the properties.
The railroad wanted to get rid of them, but they wanted to give them to somebody that would make use of them. As I understand, the city asked for them, but they had no plans whatsoever to use them.
Well, the foundation was, because of its tax-exempt status, was able to accept the donation from Norfolk Southern of those buildings, and then we were kind of intermediary of holding them and then passing them on to another entity that could actually do the development of them.
And it all came together better than we ever expected. I think the thing that we were concerned about was a major portion of downtown real estate was going to be left up to others to develop, and that DRI and the foundation needed to be involved in whatever happened on the north side of the railroad tracks.
And Rob Glenn, and I think Bev Fitzpatrick went to Norfolk to talk to, I guess it was David Good, who was president of Norfolk Southern, that we have a plan for it. And at the same time, the higher education was starting up. We immediately gave GOB North to the Higher Education Foundation. And then we put up for sale GOB South and the passenger station.
The first thing on the horizon had been the interest in the Higher Ed Center and what we call GOB North. Those were where the executive offices of the Norfolk and Western had been. Senator Edwards had gotten us, some support, and that had a future that looked like it was going to take, and that was being done because Roanoke was the largest city in the United States without a 4-year public university.
From an economic development standpoint, it was understood that the need for higher education in Roanoke was a big deal. And we knew that a new 4-year university would never be created. The idea was a further and increasing partnership with Virginia Tech and others was important to satisfying that lack of higher ed presence in Roanoke.
Senator Square was looking for a place to put the Winston Link Museum. And of course, we owned the passenger station by that time. And most people don't realize it, but the passenger station was originally Greek Revival architecture. It was not as you see it today. The remodeling was done about 1950, and at the time, was an industrial engineer called Raymond Loewy. And Raymond Loewy was the guy who did Studebaker, Lucky Strike, Greyhound, etc. And he redesigned that building. Now it's one of the best examples of his work around the country. So we were able to save the building, save the architecture, and get the Travel Bureau into that building and the Winston Link Museum. GOB South is a building that actually looks to us today like a residential building, because if you look at the roof, it's a slate roof that was very typical of the 1920s, Georgian architecture, et cetera. It really didn't look like we think about an office building today. So just looking at it from the exterior, you almost went, this could be a residential building.
The irony of that is back when we did Design 79, one of the 4 components of downtown today are, the importance of residential units, and we'd gone almost 40 years without any. And so we were really pleased to finally add the 4th dimension to Downtown Roanoke.
I honestly felt like the project would fail. I didn't want it to fail. I wanted it to succeed, but as the first major upper story downtown apartment project, to my lens, there wasn't going to be a market for it. I was horribly wrong and horribly happy about the fact.
A lot of young people and singles really thought that was a cool place, and one of them even got the bridge that went between the 2 buildings as part of their apartment. And so it had enough, I think, of a unique complexity that warranted people being more interested in it than we had anticipated. So obviously we were very pleased.
Don't be afraid to color outside the lines. The whole request for those buildings by the foundation was outrageous. It was just a very complex thing that came about very naturally, and that's my hope for the foundation's future, that future leaders can find those kinds of outrageous opportunities and make them happen.